generic boundary conditions to manage complex systems, always. And we have one set of them developed, and they are the boundary conditions of the FSSD, which is the acronym for this top management, are very often plagued by two issues. One is speed. They are in a hurry all the time. Mm-hmm. And the other is details. They can't, they regard this as details. As a future is scalable within the boundary conditions. If it is not scalable, it may just be something, which is fancy right now, and that will solve a few short-term problems. But if you put your money there, you won't get return on investment.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Future of Finance. I'm Georges Dyer, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Karl-Henrik Robèrt. Karl-Henrik, or Kalle as you'll hear me refer to him, is a pioneering scientist, medical doctor, and founder of The Natural Step, a global framework for sustainability that has influenced businesses, governments, and investors worldwide. He is also the founder, along with Göran Broman, of the Masters in Strategic Leadership Towards Sustainability program, or MSLS program, at the Blekinge Institute of Technology in Karlskrona, Sweden, which you'll hear us refer to with the Swedish acronym BTH. All of this work revolves around the Framework for Strategic Sustainable Development, or FSSD, which takes a whole system approach, providing a scientifically based definition for sustainability at the principle level, so that any group or organization can be strategic in working towards a common goal in ways that are feasible, that provide return on investment, and also drive the creativity and innovation that we need to create a truly sustainable society. We talk about the story of how Karl-Henrik got this started back in the 80s. We talk about some of the tools and methodologies that enable teams to put the framework into action, and how it can serve as a really powerful guide for investors. I hope it gives you a sense of the power of this framework and inspires you to check out some of the resources in the show notes that we talk about to learn more about the FSSD and about how systems thinking in a strategic approach can help companies and investors identify risks early and open up pathways for innovation and opportunity in the journey towards a sustainable future. Please let us know what you think. I hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, here's Kalle. Well, Kalle, thank you so much for joining me. It's great to see you. How are you doing?
It's great to see you also, George. I'm doing fine. Not the least now when I am to meet you.
Well, likewise. How's everything in Sweden these days? All good?
Right now it's sunny. It's cold, really winter temperatures, and we are looking forward to spring, like we always do at this time of the year. It's getting lighter and lighter, every hour, but it's still very cold.
Yeah, well, we've got a similar pattern happening here in New England. It's cold, but feels like real winter.
Yeah,
which is kind of nice. Well, Kalle, I'm so excited to talk and share some of your journey and some of your work with our listeners. To get us started, why don't you go ahead and just tell us, kind of what sparked you to get into the sustainability work and start The Natural Step back so many years ago?
Yeah, or even close to 40 now. Time runs, Anyhow, what did it is that I'm a cancer scientist and a cancer clinician. From training, and that is what I was doing professionally back then. Mm-hmm. And what kept worrying me when I was using more and more advanced technologies to treat the patients that came to my ward was that mankind behaving in this wonderful way when people fall sick was that same species, mankind, is destroying its own habitat, both the social system and ecosystems, systematically, while we are so clever in other matters, like, saving cancer disease patients. So I got more and more concerned about that. And when I looked out the hospital window and contemplated that indoors, we were managing this at higher and higher levels, and outdoors, mankind was destroying the same system. So I couldn't make those two pictures merge into something cohesive and easy to understand. So I began to attend ecological seminars and the like. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that what came so obvious to us inside the hospital namely that to cure cancer in a cancer-diseased body, we need boundary conditions to make that happen. There was nothing of the kind when it comes to saving ecosystems or social systems. There were no boundary conditions. So experts in different drill holes or silos or whatever you would like to call them, didn't have any shared mental model towards which we could guide our actions. So I decided to discover that and to make that a sort of mission of myself or for myself, besides the mission of becoming better cancer doctor, of course.
And this is in the 80s, so things like climate change, all these other ecological challenges had been around for a while, but they were just scattershot and sort of a million problems to solve.
Exactly right. You could look at them as the silos. So we have experts in the climate change silo, we should address them. Then we have other experts in the toxicity silo, and others in the biodiversity silo. And they all have those silos, which is good, because experts are then digging deeper and deeper into ever-increasing understanding of the respective issues. But there was nothing floating across them to guide decision makers who would like to be strategic with regard to the lot of those silos. That was simply lacking.
There's no sort of overarching goal, as you say, boundary conditions.
And that is as important to develop scientifically as indeed any of the drill holes or silos. Otherwise, we will continue to make solutions or produce solutions from one silo by worsening the situation in another. We must have some overriding strategic picture how any organization, regardless of practices or scale, would like to move towards a mission, a goal of that organization that would not run in the face of any of those life-sustaining silos or drills. And that indeed requires as deep-going science. But it is not to be found. That is the problem. It is not to be found in climate science, climatology, or toxicology, or ecology, or economy, or any of the silos. It is to be found in the design science. How do you redesign an organization that is inherently not sustainable? The answer to that must be found in the design science. So that is the silo I entered and have been doing so repeatedly for 35 years. But the excuse is that to make that functional, it need to touch base with any of the other silos. Otherwise, it would be worthless designed science.
And it's about stepping back and looking at the whole system. And as you say, there's a need for a framework to do that.
Exactly. And then applying scientific methods to crack that question, what is that? And the other is to then enter a mode of action research, applying it with organizations to see if it works in reality. Because if it is only a scientific exercise, that wouldn't help any organizations. It wouldn't be particularly useful. In fact, it must help any organization, regardless of scale, regardless of practices, regardless of regions where the respective organizations are. It must be generic, which is the term for that. And how do you find a generic framework built on a sort of checkmate boundary conditions or curing of cancer boundary conditions or any boundary conditions? How could that happen? And I decided back then to enter a dialogue process with the leading experts on sustainability in Sweden. And the mindset for them to be engaged in the dialogue with me was that if we score and make it happen, we will nail the outcome of our work to every Swedish household and every school in Sweden.
And that happened,
which was
right?
a compelling thing to hear from the scientists that I was addressing. Yeah.
And so that led to this process of creating what became the framework for strategic sustainable development.
And that was the start of it. So we managed to develop together an overriding picture of sustainability. That's one. But not the boundary conditions yet. And then we managed to outline in consensus between all those scientists the self-benefit of doing this. Why would it be good for an individual organization to gradually develop its practices to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem? Because we realized that if there really are solutions to be found by systematically approaching boundary conditions, that would pay off. Because unsustainability is a challenge to life itself. And survival issues are very convincing in the end. So we realized that more and more sustainability-driven markets would happen, where we also can find the self-benefit of being a hero, of helping society at large and selling innovations to help civilization at large survive. And vice versa, if you don't do that and are yourself a problem, you will have to pay more and more for all those mishaps that you create to your own organization. But the boundary conditions were not there. When we managed to broadcast or send this consensus document out to every Swedish household, it was formatted as an audio cassette. Modern people don't even know what it is, but it's a little tape that we used back 35 years ago into a little monitor or a little audio cassette or a little audio machine. And then you could hear a sound coming out from one of the most beloved Swedish voices from media at that time. And Villius was his name. And then to go with that, there was a picture book. And Swedes had never got, free of charge, a present like that in the mailbox before, a very beautiful picture book and an audio cassette. And I managed to sponsor it, and we sent it out. So we actually scored. We made it happen. And it created a huge empowerment of what I wanted to do. So before I knew it, I was in TV sofas all over the place, responding to questions, how this was possible and how I did it and so forth and so on. And then I always grabbed hold of the opportunity to explain a bit of the contents as well, to repeat that to the Swedes. So I'd obviously already got that picture book and the audio cassette. And eventually it spread abroad as well, which was my intention, of course. So that was the kickstart of the natural step, which eventually led to the situation where we are in now, where the framework and everything is outlined in pretty much detail.
Yeah. And so for our listeners, the natural step was an NGO essentially to kind of help develop these ideas and get them out there. And that included the natural step framework, which we now talk about as the framework for strategic sustainable development.
So I had an extremely tough workload because first of all, I had to run my cancer clinic. And then over and above that, I had started the natural step with an international recognition. And then I had to train my colleagues to be good teachers of what it was we were teaching as it was evolving. And then I had to take care of clients so that they would feel well recognized with regard to their specific problems. So I was working a bit.
A lot of motivation, I'm sure, though, at that time. It was. Yeah, a lot of exciting new concepts. And I think, the world was sort of waking up around that time to the concept of sustainable development. But as you say, there weren't clear definitions of what that meant at a scientific kind of
That's right. There were no definitions. And still, this is the only definition we have right now. The boundary conditions for sustainability is the only systematic, and strategic definition we have for sustainability. And you must have it if you really want to be strategic, moving gradually towards an image of your mission in the future, your vision in the future, that would comply with the boundary conditions. You can't do without the boundary conditions. Then your mission would not be difficult. It would be impossible if you don't have them.
Exactly. And these conditions also referred to as the sustainability principle. There was 4 initially, 3 ecologically focused principles, 1 sort of socially focused principle, and that socially focused principle is now expanded to 5, right, for a total of 8.
That's right. Yeah, well, now we have 5 social ones. Yes, exactly. That's what you said.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, for a total of 8. And that gives the kind of constraints that any organization, any group can use as a definition of sustainability for their operations, whether they're contributing to violating those principles or not.
Exactly. Right.
And I think, as you said earlier, that concept of what we've talked about is enlightened self-interest for organizations really it kind of comes back to understanding this bigger picture, right? Because if they're just operating as their one unique institution or organization, not sort of thinking about the add-on effects of their activities, there isn't that self-interest necessary. I think we see a lot of that of organizations, companies looking to externalize any cost that they can and just sort of say, not my problem. But taking this sort of whole system, big picture perspective helps organizations to see that not only is it their problem, it's everybody's problem, and they'll do better if they're kind of more innovative and strategic at addressing those issues.
This is forced onto us as a merciless funnel, as it were. We are losing more and more climate stability, forests, soils, purity in ecosystems, biodiversity. We're just losing more and more and more. So it is like a funnel leading inwards. And whatever you are doing, you're a banker, you are doing wellness, you are in risk capital investments, you are producing digging machines or cars or whatever. You are part of the funnel because we are all there. This is a global entity. And since the pressure will be harder and harder and harder to develop solutions in the problem, and since the costs will be higher and higher and higher for those who are relatively other actors, more part of the structure, you will have waste management costs, insurance costs, bad image costs, whatever, from mishaps and wrongdoings. Both of those things are mercilessly driving people in this funnel. Whereas more and more sustainability-driven markets evolve, the funnel is mercilessly hitting those who don't understand how they should gradually move their investments towards the opening of the funnel rather than right into the wall. And this has got nothing to do, well, only indirectly to a small bit, but it is the major part is not what politicians say or want or what summits will arrive at with regard to agreements or anything like that. The funnel is just there. So those markets are evolving as we speak, and it goes faster and faster and faster. So those who are relatively others, plagued by, polluting relatively more or running high risks with regard to ecological safety or whatever, and losing out on innovations that will be more and more relevant on the future markets. If you are losing on both, you are a high-risk company. And this means that the difference between investment companies on the one hand and any actor on the other with regard to investments is not large. If you are an investment company, it's a sort of indirect thinking. Am I investing in companies or practices or products that are inherently not possible to scale up in that funnel. You will lose out. And if you are yourself one of those who, produce those things or whatever, it is the same. So either you have an indirect reason to be cautious about your investment objectives, or you are indeed one of those objectives yourself. Doesn't matter. It's the same thinking of gradually improving in the same funnel.
Well, that's what always got me so excited about the application of all of this for investors, is because it does give you a really powerful lens to look at companies that most investors don't do explicitly. I think on some level.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, on some level, a lot of investors are systems thinkers, and they look at a company and they think about all the direct and indirect factors that are going to make it successful or not. But this whole framework, as you say, sort of gives a methodology to look at a company and sort of say, how are they doing on regard to sustainability? And are there these risks that they're going to hit the funnel walls and hit issues? Or are there opportunities where they can be innovative?
Exactly right, George. And sometimes they even say that we are thinking holistically about those matters. What do you mean? You say, well, we have life cycle assessments to make sure that the whole supply chain, including our clients, are on the same page with regard to sustainability. And then we ask them, so what is sustainability in your mind? And then you hear all kinds of stories about circular economy or getting rid of stuff that destroys safe climate system or whatever. It's just bits and pieces of the story. So it's not the holistic. On the other hand, if you try to be holistic with some vague philosophical theory, it mimics flaky philosophies that cannot do for a hardcore thinking businessman. So what you need is boundary conditions that are reliable, that are robust, always the same, towards which you can steer your gradual investments, just like a chess player does. What are the boundary conditions for checkmate? There are 4. And then how do I guide gradually the game to comply with them before my competitor on the chessboard does? And each time he does a move or she, you have to rethink, but never by trashing the boundary conditions for checkmate. They are the same. So we need generic boundary conditions to manage complex systems, always. And we have one set of them developed, and they are the boundary conditions of the FSSD, which is the acronym for this. And if you don't have that, you will fail. But if you have it, you will score on bottom lines, not the least on bottom lines, financially, from up front, if you do it right. Not too fast, because then you don't get return on investments, and not too slow, because then others will grab hold of the market opportunities that offer themselves on the more and more sustainability-driven markets. You must surf on the cutting edge. How could you if you don't have any definition of what sustainability is? It must be one that is from design science, so that it can help you to redesign, keeping the stuff which is already very good in your business and gradually moving other things that need to be developed before it is hit by the funnel. That's how the game is played. And that's it always is beneficial from upfront if you do it right. From the beginning.
And that's what you've called the smart zone, too, of not going too fast, but not going too slow. And I think that's a critically important concept, because I think we see a lot of times sustainability-focused or mission-driven organizations try to go too fast too soon and kind of get ahead of themselves, get ahead of where the markets are, get ahead of where regulations are. Yeah. And then they don't have, as you say, the return on investment. That economic engine falls through, and then they're not going to be successful, if they don't have that.
Precisely right. But there is also a little small risk embedded there, namely that before, saying when I started this 35 years ago, everything moved still in that funnel, but relatively slow. Now, as the funnel walls have closed up even more, the heat has gone up, and now it goes faster and faster. So the changes on the market unfold much faster now than it did before. So it is more and more risky to believe that, well, that problem will come later. Well, that's up to you, actually. If you think it will come later, go ahead and continue to do something which is not responding to this question. Is this scalable in that funnel, or is it not? If it is not scalable within the boundary conditions, if it is not that, well, then you are taking a risk. And that risk is not increasing in a linear fashion. It is increasing more in an exponential fashion. That's my notion here.
As the funnel walls kind of close in faster, we see more of the impacts of unsustainability. And you mentioned too the policy piece being a small part of it, but it's an important part of it, right? In terms of investors thinking about the time horizons they're operating on. So on a short term,
very much so. Because and it works like this: the private market, where we find people who can think and who love nature and love social systems and so forth, they are reacting to unsustainability. They are more and more afraid of toxicity and climate change and all these things because they can think and they listen and they hear and they conclude. So they then react by turning to companies or decision makers, also from the public sector, to if it is a private sector, to purchase stuff which is developing in the right direction. And if they may also be an employee of a municipality or whatever. So it is first the private sector reacting by worries, and they influence leaders from the private sector, but also the public sector, sooner or later. But very often it is the private sector coming first. And when electric cars, ecological foods, whatever, have begun to develop, it is not a linear expansion, but it goes a bit down and goes a bit up, and eventually the curve is going up more and more and more because it belongs to the future. So there is a risk then that you don't catch the train when it is leaving your station. At the same time, as if you pay attention and become one of the forerunners, you will also positively influence politicians, because politicians in a democracy find it very difficult to be ahead of the game. They don't dare to make political decisions for which there is no support in the general public, because then they lose votes. So the first to react are the general public worrying about this or that. Then comes the private sector responding to what they are worrying about and so forth. And then comes, in a democracy, politicians seeing that now this is happening, and that is, a market for votes as well. So then they come out on the scene, which is nice in a way. That's how a democracy should work.
Right. They'll get out in front of the parade once it's moving.
Yeah. And then they will enhance the reaction. Exactly, George.
I want to come back a little bit to, you mentioned life cycle analysis and some of these other tools that we see in the sort of sustainability field, which are all very useful, but as you say, sometimes don't have that broader context. And I know you had released, when I was in the master's program back 20 years ago, which we'll talk about in a minute, you had a paper called the Tools and Concepts paper that sort of talked about how some of these topics like, the ecological footprint and other concepts fit within the framework for strategic sustainable development. And you've got a new paper that sort of seems like an update to that with some of the newer concepts around planetary boundaries.
Exactly right. Yes. So before we did it on a certain level, now we have really advanced it by calling this an operative system. It's quite fresh, but it's very relevant. An operative system in the IT world, is like Android or Apple or whatever. And then you have the apps. And the operative system is there to link any kind of app to it, to create cohesion between the apps so that their relative value increases by being put together into your mobile telephone or your computer. And that is what this generic structure for systemic, taking the whole world into account, systematic processes, and strategic, earning from upfront on the bottom lines if you apply it. And we only have one operative system for that. Now, we call that an ABCD assessment. It means that you are in the funnel, and the operative system recently published, as you pointed out, simply refers to ABCD in the funnel. Everything is in the funnel. And A is to draw the boundary conditions ahead of you in that funnel. And then you put contents for your mission. If you're selling furniture or cars, or if you are down, it's like yourself, whatever. So you have contents, and you model the contents within the 8 sustainability constraints. That's A. And then, without having gone too deep into that, you just sketch it with your friends and colleagues. And then you go back to B, which is today. How are we doing today, guys, with regard to where we want to be? Where are the challenges? Where are our assets? Because we are certainly not bad on everything. And you put that on today's B list. And that creative tension between where you want to be and where you are automatically gives rise to various optional moves, just like a chess player. That's checkmate. This is how I'm doing right now on the board. What kind of possible moves does that trigger in my brain? And you just do the same in your community of leaders or whatever. And that creates a C list of possible moves. And from that, you move to D. And then the ABCD is done. What does D mean? It means that you make prioritizations from the C list. What should I do first? Because A, will it move in the right direction towards our A? And B, will it be a good platform for further moves in context of what is otherwise on the C list? And 3, will it earn money soon enough as a good investment? And when you get the yes on all those questions, you end up on the D list. And then you just repeatedly do this. And when you do it repeatedly among smart people, which comes across as a brain after a while, because when you've done this a lot, it will be like a well-trained brain, where you have experts competent on different skills. And when that operate together with one and the same operative system, you get smarter and smarter, things within at the A level. You get more and more good things to think about on the B level, more and more proposed smart moves on the C list, and prioritizations on the D list. Now, when you've done your ABCDs a couple of times in this way, you have made your tailor-made ABCD in funnel assessment, obviously. Now you can read United Nations Sustainability Goals, which are 17 goals. They are actually not goals. They are stories from certain domains that are attractive, but they are beautifully put together as such. Now you can read all of them, and you can see if you would like to add something after that reading through on your A, on your B, on your C, and on your D list. And in this way, you see how this is an operative system. Now, what about circular economy is always the same. What is circular economy? It's about how to capitalize on more tight circular flows of matter by recycling, for instance. Okay? So now you've done your ABCD. Have we missed anything, guys, on the A in the future? Should we cycle more or less? And some suggestion would be, let's stop it. We don't need to recycle anything there because we have changed our focus onto services instead of running matters around. And furthermore, the stuff we had problem with should not be recycled. It should be phased out or whatever the answer is. But sometimes you may have missed something that you can capitalize on that should be recycled. And then you put that in A. And then you may have a problem on the B list that you're not only already doing it. And the way to go there would end up on the C list. And then, of course, this would affect how the D list would work. So by cross-reading your ABCD, your tailor-made ABCD plan to the 17 United Nations goals will help you to take all of them into account. And circular economy to take that also into account, but in a way that suits you and your plan. Now, if we go back to the United Nations Sustainability Goals, which is a huge opportunity to the whole world, that the leading geopolitical organization has bothered to do that for us all. What do people do with it today if they don't have access to the ABCD and FUND operative system? Well, they don't have any strategy then, which is systemic, systematic, and strategic. So what do? They hold up their finger in the wind, and then they pick a few of the goals. I think that number 3 and 7 and 12 is closest to our actions and practices, which is not what the United Nations had dreamt about. They would like companies to take into consideration all of the goals. But how do you do that if you don't have any strategy, no boundary conditions, nothing? You have not started your company to comply with 17 of the United Nations sustainability goals. So there is no instruction in the 17 goals per se. And in this way, you can just repeat it over and over and over again to any kind of goal, thereby emphasizing why this is an operative system, just like Android or Google or Linux or any other operative system in the IT world.
Yeah, and we do see that a lot with investment companies too, just picking a few of the sustainable development goals to focus on. And it does, we have to take them all into account and take the whole system perspective because they're all interrelated. And I think I just want to point out too on the ABCD methodology that you were describing, I think a beautiful thing about it is it'll be very familiar to anyone familiar with business strategy more generally. It's about kind of setting that vision for where you want your organization to go, looking at where you are now, and then, as you say, what are the strategic step-by-step actions that will get you there. And this is just about ensuring that that vision is really explicitly a vision, not just of a successful organization, but a successful organization in a sustainable society, in a future where that organization is not contributing to unsustainability. And that, I think, just opens up both the opportunity to be really strategic, but also the opportunity for innovation, which I think you were kind of alluding to, that it's not necessarily just about recycling the products that you've got now, but maybe really rethinking the business model about what materials you use, or do you sell products or do you offer services, and those types of things you referred to. I think that's something that I think is often missed when people see sustainability as just a constraint or a list of things you can't do, and that's a limit to creativity. And it's really the opposite, right? It gives you these constraints where people can be limitlessly creative and innovative.
Exactly. And if I hear, why am I not surprised? We're really amongst the best of the best of the best of the sustainability program we were running in Sweden many years ago when you took part in it. And I hear from you that you're seeing it in the same way as I do. But if you look at your arena at large, how do investors generally do it today? They have generally two roads, at least here in Europe, which are the most common ones. One is a sort of punishment mode, which means that companies who appear unethical are punished by organizations not investing in them. And the other is a sort of clean tech or new innovations or whatever. But again, if a company should be punished or not doesn't say much about how clever they will be onto more and more sustainability-driven markets. It may very well be that some of them are, not caring and therefore have a bad reputation because they have poor ethics and they will underperform. But we don't know. So because this is strict, the boundary conditions are there and the funnel is there and so forth. The other then is the same about clean tech. How do you know that this clean tech innovation that this company is running has a future, is scalable within the boundary conditions? If it is not scalable, it may just be something, which is fancy right now and that will solve a few short-term problems. But if you put your money there, you won't get return on investment. So both of those are actually flawed. We have begun to see a few companies coming across who want a third arena for investments to come true, which is called transition. Transition, I think, is the name. Mm-hmm. They want to see if something is possible to transit. But again, how do they know if they don't have any boundary conditions towards which to transit? So no matter what you do, if you're trying to put your money on the right stuff, you will fail unless you have a feeling of what is scalable onto future markets and what is not.
Exactly. And this, I think, brings us to the crux of the matter around leadership. I mean, so much of what investors look at in companies is the people that are leading them. And part of what you're saying there is, do these companies have the leadership to transition in this great time of everything shifting and the need to move towards sustainable models? The business at its core could be from the old legacy economy or the new clean tech economy, but there's lots of companies in between that are providing the things we need, and they need to do so in a sustainable way.
Yeah,
that's going to take leaders.
Couldn't agree more. Mm-hmm. I just want to add a footnote there when it comes to leadership, because mm-hmm. what we refer to here, George, is leadership at all levels. Why do I point that out? Well, in many organizations, even from your industry, we very often see middle management that pays attention. Mm-hmm. It is the HR manager, or maybe it is the sustainability manager or whatever. Whereas the top management don't have time to learn anything new. So they are running business as usual, whereas middle management turn to us for help. And they do not only want help in putting the boundary conditions out there and showing how to stepwise approve them in on any field, on any arena. They also want our help to convince top management to listen and pay attention. Mm-hmm. So that's questions we very often get from middle management these days, because top management are very often plagued by two issues. One is speed. They are in a hurry all the time. Mm-hmm. And the other is details. They can't, they regard this as details. Mm-hmm. And speed, and we very often learn that the devil is in speed or haste rather, and the devil is in details. And there we have a hidden ugly face looking at us when top managements are in a hurry dealing with details, like a strike on the fourth of our factories right now, and then this scandal which is now hitting this market or whatever. They are all the time driven by happenings on the market, mm-hmm. rather than a considerate way of contemplating where they want to be and be clear about that, where they are in that context, what the optional investments they could think of, and how to make prioritizations amongst them, A, B, C, D in the funnel. Mm-hmm. So I just pointed that out when it comes to leadership.
Yeah, it's a great point. It happens at all levels. And you mentioned the need for learning around all this too. I mean, a lot of these concepts are new for people. And that brings us back to higher education, which is, of course, where we work as well. And the master's program, the Master's in Strategic Leadership Towards Sustainability, you co-founded 20 years ago now. We were just back in Sweden this summer to celebrate that at the Blekinge Institute of Technology. And yeah, talk a little bit about what made you realize the need for a program like this and the design that you brought to that program in terms of who you were looking to attract and from what disciplines and what parts of the world.
In a way, indirectly, I've already responded to it, but if so, I would like to repeat it, since there are different drill holes all over. Also in academia, we have chemistry, we have physics, we have ecology, we have economy, we have all those drill holes. Mm-hmm. And unsustainability is the greatest challenge to mankind ever. We have never, ever been put at jeopardy at the global scale due to our own misdoings, so to speak. And how can you study chemistry without being aware of that? How can we educate chemists who don't have a clue about what are the boundary conditions for a generically sustainable world? And how does the possible future development of chemistry, what has it got to do with that way of changing the conditions for all of society? And likewise for medicine or physics or climatology or whatever. So no expert, no field of expertise, no organization, whatever they do, have their actions outside the realm of the funnel and a chance of making much better investments towards their future. No one is free with regard to that. We are all captured here on Earth by the funnel and the intellectual demand to learn how to play this new game, because it is new actually, only a few decades. Before that, mankind never had to pay attention. We were too few and we didn't have the industrialized power to worry about. But now we are challenged by ourselves.
It's a whole new mindset, right? And I think we as humans are just sort of starting to wrap our heads around it. And our educational systems were designed, a few hundred years ago, as you say, before these issues were really at the planetary scale.
Yeah, in drill holes. And drill holes were okay.
Yeah, and I think that was a big takeaway that I got from the program was the importance of, what we talk about as a transdisciplinary approach of how do we enable conversations between the disciplines. And you always used a great example of even in your field of cancer research, you had such specialists that you'd go to conferences and couldn't even understand each other all in the same discipline, right? It got that specialized. And yeah, I think the master's program, the MSLS program is just such a great approach. In my year, this is the second year of the program back in 2005, 2006, we had, the ages range from 22 to 65 or 70 and people at all stages of their careers from all over the world, different sectors, different approaches. And the framework really taught us how to work together and talk about these issues across cultures, across expertise, and put that into action, as you say. So it was a great experience and definitely one I would highly encourage anyone listening who might be interested in learning more about sustainability or transitioning in your career to focus on this work to check out, because it's a great experience for 1 year and a great community now too.
And I would like, by courtesy, to respond back to you. We were very, very happy to have you there, George, because you were again amongst the best of the best of the best taking part in the program. And that doesn't say little, because somehow we seem to attract very smart people and very devoted people prepared to move to this remote part of the world in Karlskrona of Sweden, from wherever they live, and taking part in this program. It somehow addressed the right people, and you stood out. So I was so happy when you addressed me with the opportunity to take part in this podcast.
Well, thank you. And I think the bigger point is the one you made around just how many skills and perspectives and unique qualities people brought from all over the world. And yeah, it was a magical time. I met my wife there, as you know, and we're continuing to work on together on all of this. And we've got this great global community. And it was so nice to get back together with so many of them last summer for that reunion and just see what people are doing all over the world with this shared framework now. Well, a couple of questions as we wrap up, Kalle. One is, and you've covered this a bit too, but just any other thoughts on for young people who are passionate about these issues, want to do something, maybe are in school or in college already. What kind of advice would you give them as they look to make an impact?
Well, we have written quite a lot, which is easy to comprehend and doesn't require experience in science to come across as readable, easy to understand. For instance, a picture book that I would be happy to put out there for any of the audience to get access to. Maybe you can tell them how to get access to it. Mm-hmm. It's a picture book where the stuff we have covered is explained in simple English terms with very clear pictures. So that could be a start. Another start could be to look up the BTH, Blekinge Institute of Technology, and look at the MSLS program, which is the one you're referring to. It has an alumni which is closing up to 1,000 now and is doing very well. The alumni is doing very well. There at the BTH, we also run webinars that are, of course, very much easier to take part in than to take your luggage and move to Karlskrona and stay there for a year that you did. So there are different opportunities to do this. And I would start there, looking at the picture book, see if you are still captured, and then maybe look up a few references and take it from there.
That sounds great. And yeah, we'll put links to all of that in the show notes for folks to check out. And again, I would definitely recommend looking deeper at the MSLS program. And then a couple of final ones. You've sort of been covering this throughout our whole conversation, but given the framework and where you see society going, and what do you see as the role of finance in that future, in that sustainable future?
Well, I think that it may very well be the most crucial factor, because if money does not land where change needs to happen, and that's what we're talking about now, we need systemic change of energy systems, traffic systems, energy flows, material flows, forestry, agriculture, HR issues. We need money to flow into those areas in a way that doesn't run in the face of anything else. If we can't find ways of having money flowing in such a transdisciplinary, smart, systematic and strategic way, I see a very dangerous future ahead. And vice versa, if money flows that way at last, we will get more and more innovations and changes of technology, of the technology type, of the governance type, of all kinds of ways of cooperation. So I cannot stress hard enough the role for money to end up where change needs to happen.
Thank you. And finally, I want to just touch on, I know you've got some exciting new work happening right now, another project related to AI. And as we think about managing in complexity with all of this, I mean, there is so much data, so many angles that are all interrelated around these topics of sustainability. And the framework is a beautiful way to help structure all of that but there's still all of that data. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear a little more about what you're working on in terms of how AI
well,
might
the framework has made it, so to speak. It is the framework of choice when it comes to systematic, and strategic change, because it is theoretically explored and designed that way. And it's the only one designed that way. The other is that it is well tested across the globe in numerous public sectors, municipalities, regions, and so forth, but also private sectors in numerous big companies, fancy companies, that have shown how they have done much better by stepwise changes in the direction the framework has told them to do. But having said that, the world is far away from doing this in the systematic ways those proactive examples have done. To that end, we need many, many more facilitators, coaches, consultants of your kind, George, knowing this stuff to be comfortably running ABCD sessions wherever you are. And to that end, in a modern IT society, why not testing AI engines? So we are right now developing FSSD Global, which is a platform to which you can click yourself in and then acquire a green belt in systematic planning accordingly, using the framework, learning what it is, and then also getting trained by the AI engine. And then not only that, the AI engine will offer you to begin developing your own business accordingly, up to green belt of knowledge. Would this then, and that will be offered as an open source, free of charge. Would you then need to get things further explored at a deeper level, requiring personal input from experts who are already trained? You may have to pay for it if you want to acquire blue or brown or black belt in this way of thinking. Mm-hmm. But then again, you can also then be part of the organization as such, as something to look forward to. So that's how the FSSD global platform is under design right now. Mm-hmm. And I'm so happy to talk about it because I have noticed how I would guess 90% of my work hours these days are about that particular challenge. Reason being that I have spent 35 years of my life to do more and more scientific articles, hatching more and more PhD students, running the master's program you have been referring to. Mm-hmm. But now is the time to ask myself, how can I make this more accessible to anyone so that it becomes more fun to learn it, easier to do it, and easily accessible anywhere in a modern IT environment? How could I do that? Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm glad you brought it up.
No, that's great. It's so exciting, and can't wait to see where it goes and when it's released. And like I said, we'll put a link in our show notes to all of these resources so people can stay up to date and dive in. But Kalle, thank you so much again for your time. It's been wonderful to catch up. As always, thank you for your leadership in creating all of this and all you've done for me. So I really appreciate it, and always good to see you.
Well, right back to you, George. And again, if you would like any support in getting links up there with references and stuff to your audience, please let me know so that we can work together on that, so that the links will end up on your homepage or however you would like to run that. Mm-hmm. Thank you again, George.
You bet.
All the best.
Thank you. And I'll Thanks for tuning in for the Future of Finance podcast. We hope you found today's conversation insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast platform. And please take a moment to rate, review, or share the show. All of this really helps us to reach more people like you who care about creating a thriving and sustainable future. And it's a really easy way to have a big impact. So please do follow. A quick disclaimer, the content of this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice. Investments and strategies discussed may not be suitable for all listeners. Please consult a financial, legal, tax, or accounting professional before making any investment decisions. References to managers and funds are for informational purposes only and should not be considered endorsements or investment solicitations. This podcast does not monitor fund performance or guarantee the accuracy of third-party materials or statements. This has been an episode of the Future of Finance podcast, exploring how finance can shape a vibrant and sustainable future. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.